one thing people have told me my whole life, you should just get over it. I used to get my ass kicked on a daily basis in school. I was always a new kid in a new school. And I really couldn't concentrate on schooling because kids were just really, really mean. And people would always say, you just need to get over it. I had a bad family life. My family really didn't want me. I wound up on the streets as a teenager. People say you should just get over it. And because I was on the streets so young, I had some really bad things happen to me. Besides being molested as a kid, I was actually raped as a young man by a man. I was held captive in a house with 8 trained guard dogs. There were moments where I thought that I was going to die. I've been robbed out on the streets. I've had guns in my face and I've had knives at my throat. And there were so many times that I didn't think I was going to make it out of that. And people say you should just get over it. There was a lot of time in my life where I didn't know how to process that. I couldn't process it. And so everything festered and it just kind of grew this bubble of rage. And of course, through some of the traumatic experiences I had, you could probably say I had post-traumatic stress disorder. I've been officially diagnosed with that. And I try not to lean too much on mental health diagnoses because I know how it works. But there is something to the fact that you go through a hell of a lot in your life and it leaves a stain on you. And people say you should just get over it. And I gotta tell you, I am so sick of people saying you just need to get over it. It doesn't matter how much counseling you go through in life. It doesn't matter what you do, how much you try to focus on bettering yourself, how much you try to focus on what happened to you so you can deal with it. It will always be a part of you. It will always be a part of your past. And it's part of your makeup. And when things like that happen to you, it changes who you are. So I've gone through all this stuff and didn't know how to process it, didn't know how to deal with it, developed really bad problems. I developed severe panic disorder. And that was another thing that people say, you know, you just gotta get over it. And I guess my question to people is, how exactly do you get over stuff like this? Because I know people that have been raped or molested. I know people that have had bad family situations. I know people that have lived on the streets. I know very few people in life that I have met that have come close to living everything that I've lived. So I don't know how to get over it. And back when I thought that I was finally getting myself to a point where I could mentally focus on my life, because before that, my mind was kind of a bowl of jello. I mean, my medical problems hit. And, you know, the medical problems, I'll be honest, some of them could be from the anxiety, from the mental disorders. I don't believe that they all are. I have some very bad stomach issues, some heart rhythm things going on. And so, you know, a lot of people get disheartened with me sometimes staring at me in my life because they see the potential that's here, but they forget everything that's going on here. And that is its own kind of turmoil. One of the big things I really want to stress to everybody, though, is unless you've been in somebody's shoes and unless you know what that walk is like, don't judge them. Don't tear them down. They have already had it bad enough. And I'll tell you, that's one bad thing about school, especially nowadays. If you have problems, maybe you're just going through some hard times. Maybe you've got, some severe depression for whatever reason. Maybe you got a hard time concentrating. And I'll be honest, especially with this new wave of, the last couple of generations doing heavy drugs and shit, you see that more and more. And I do think there is a direct link. I really do. Because it's so prevalent now. But that's getting off topic. Kids, they can be especially mean. Especially if you're not a pretty boy or a pretty girl. They are very quick to let you know that you don't fit in. They're very quick to let you know that there's something that's not right about you. They're very quick to let you know you are not part of our town. It's something I went through. I moved to a town where literally everybody noticed I was different. They didn't know what the hell I was going through. They just saw a kid that was different and singled me out. And when they did a lot of damage. And to give you a kind of a perfect example, there was a kid who threw cologne in my face because he thought it would be funny. He didn't realize that the chemicals inside the cologne would give me chemical burns inside my eye sockets, permanently damaging my eyes. It was funny at the time until he realized, oh shit, I really just hurt this kid bad. And even then, my own parents, when they brought that kid and his mother to our house, they were like, don't worry about it. Kids will be kids. That's how my parents defended me, because they didn't want to deal with shit. They just couldn't deal with anything because they were too consumed with their own lives. And yet I'm permanently scarred, literally. You have to take time sometimes to be in the other person's shoes, to really think about them. And I'm going to kind of segue here into a different topic. And because they both connected, and I wanted to put these both in the same video. And that is, there is a huge stigma on mental health. There's a huge stigma because people who don't have any mental health problems, they judge, they don't understand. How can they understand? But in our society today, if we don't understand something, it's not real. And that's how people treat it. And so people who are fighting problems like post-traumatic stress disorder, depression's a very fine line for me, because sometimes I do agree you just need to get your ass the fuck out of the house, start mingling, exercise, do what it takes. That is a fine line. There are times when I think people use mental health very loosely. But there are times when it is genuine. And with me, I have cycles where I have severe anxiety and panic attacks, and other times I feel completely normal. Like, it's there sometimes, and actually sometimes it takes over. Like, it's so bad that I literally cannot control my life at all. Other times I'm perfectly normal to most people. And so, I want people to understand kind of where this comes from. I've kind of already stated little bits and pieces of everything I went through, but think about one instance in particular that I mentioned. You're 17 years old. You're very green about the world. You don't know anything about life. You've been hidden away and sheltered up until you hit the streets. Now you're on the streets, and this guy sees you in an Orlando Greyhound station. He offers you a ride, and he's talking about how he can get you a job, and so we go to his place to get some business cards, supposedly. And as soon as I walked through the doorway to his house, I was a prisoner. He had 8 trained guard dogs. And I was raped in that house. And there was a moment where he gave one of the dogs a command in German. Like me and him were in the bedroom and with one of the dogs. And the dog is suddenly, you know, snarling, baring its teeth, foaming at the mouth, you know, looks like it could attack at any second, and probably would have if I wasn't frozen stiff with fear. And it was at that moment that I knew I was dead. Like, I shouldn't be here right now. Like, my mind was convinced, all right, this is it, I'm done. And the stark fear that you get from knowing that you're dead, from that instance where you're convinced you're not going to make it out of this house, that does something to you. And I relate it something like this. If I shoot a person in the knee, eventually the wound is going to heal. But that scar is going to be there. You can't wash that scar away. And that's kind of like what it is with mental health sometimes. If I shoot somebody in the knee, it might damage him so bad that he limps for the rest of his life. You can't wash that limp away. It's there. The damage is done. And again, that's what I liken it to mental health. Because sometimes something traumatic happens and something snaps in here. And it's something you can't wash away. The damage is done. Like, whatever happened, happened, and you can't go back to the way things were, ever. It changes who you are. Honestly, a lot of times, sexual predators make sexual predators. Because their psyche is screwed up and they relate sex to violence now. And it's unfair to the victim. And it's especially unfair that the victim then becomes the perpetrator. And let me clarify, I just want to be clear on this. Anybody who ever is a sexual offender in any way is not cool. Ever. It's not cool. I don't care what the reason is. I don't care what the excuse is. I just want to say that because I'm not trying to make excuses for any of it. I just want to be clear on that. But I am saying that it does something to your mind. It does something, it just alters your patterns completely. Your whole way of thinking sometimes. I eventually found a very good family, and I was still young and I was fresh off the streets. I was fresh off all these things that had happened. And I didn't know how to adjust to that life. I mean, less than a year ago, I had this rape incident. Less than a year ago. And I was still on the streets just a couple of months ago. So I go from being on the streets to, you know, this wonderful family giving me a place. But I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how to live that life. I couldn't mentally... I was still a child in so many ways. And I'll be frank, at 40 years old, there are ways that I still have not matured. Part of me just stopped growing. And I can't explain it. I don't know why. I know it's there. But something along my life just hit the pause button on my growth. And part of it came from living day to day. Part of it came from you don't know what's going to happen from day to day. You might find somebody to go into a house and, you know, you have a place to stay, and who knows what's going to happen. The floor might fall out. They may try to come up to you, and all of a sudden it's a place to stay for sexual favors or something. Like, people try that shit. And so I got used to not really adjusting to life that well. I got used to live in the moment. Enjoy what you can while you can, because tomorrow isn't guaranteed about anything. And in a way, that's its own, like, mental hang-up. And so I'm trying to paint the portrait of how lives can form these big mental blocks and mental barriers. And there are things that happen in your life sometimes that are so tragic that it just stops everything completely. And it's very easy to say, just get over it. You know, just buck up. It happened. There's nothing you can do about it. You have to move on with your life. There's truth to that, and it's very valid. That is one of the most valid comments anybody can make, to be very honest, because at some point, your past will either dictate your future and control your life, or it will be a lesson that allowed you to overcome things. But it's very hard to tell, you know, when which is going to happen, because people handle things very differently. And depending on the amount of the trauma and the extent of the trauma, sometimes people don't come back. Honestly, this is how people wind up in padded cells for the rest of their lives, or in prisons, or killing themselves. So, for the people who don't understand mental health, I hope that this kind of paints a portrait. And I've been very open about this, obviously. I've gone into like literally a couple of the darkest corners of my life, because I want people to understand. I want people to get it. There are people who use mental health a little too easily. You know, everybody's bipolar now. No, you had a bad day. You're depressed. You've got manic depression. No, you just can't pick yourself up at the moment. That's not what I'm talking about. I understand that there are people like that, and it actually kind of pisses me off. I'm talking about the people who are genuinely messed up. And make no mistake about it, people. I don't say it with pride. I don't brag about it. I just say it as matter-of-factly as I can. You do not go through the things I have gone through in my life without being seriously screwed up. You don't. You know, and this is where I'm at now. I've got health issues now that I'm dealing with, but I'm still trying to overcome, you know, a lot of my past. And I will the rest of my life, to be very frank. You know, there are people who love to say that they've gotten past, they've dealt with their past. You never deal with your past. Your past is always there. You can always look back. It can always creep up and remind you what happened. And it can always affect your present. So ladies and gentlemen, these are my thoughts. I just wanted to share my story a little bit and share kind of my outlook on mental health and kind of the stigma around it, because I know a lot of people who don't have it. They really look at other people who say, you know, I've got anxiety or panic attacks like it's a cheap phrase to get attention. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it is the case, but not always. So it's food for thought. I hope you guys took something away from this. I know it's really deep. This is something that's incredibly personally making someone vulnerable. And to be vulnerable like this and to, you know, kind of show out the darkest parts of your life, to get people to understand something, you know, it does take a certain amount of effort. And I want to understand that I don't want people making any stupid comments on this post if you see it. And the main reason being is because it is a personal subject to me, and I don't want people being dicks. It really comes down to that. And I've been the abject of a lot of bullying in my life, and I'm not going to deal with it on my channel. Not for me, not for anybody else. So, to be clear about that. But ladies and gentlemen, I do hope you did take something away from this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Opinions are always welcome here. Just keep it nice. Other than that, if you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. My name is Kevin Jackowitz. Kaged Nation, out.